Welcome everyone to this Mindful Moments podcast. If you are new to these podcasts, welcome. It's lovely to have you. And if you are joining us again, welcome back. So these conversations, these discussions are an opportunity for us to share what mindfulness looks in different people's lives, how practices can show up and are integrated into people's day and how they've changed over time. My name is Lily. I am the founder of Mindful Sparks, and today I'm joined by Elle Frantz-Larson, a school counselor. So Elle is a social emotional counselor who's been studying, practicing, and teaching yoga and mindfulness for all of her adult life. This practice has taken her from her degree studying psychology to the banks of the Ganges, seeking a better way to exist and harmonize with herself and the earth. She's a lifelong learner, mother, animal lover, and traveler, trying to make it through one day at a time. And may I just also add, she's an amazing friend, and I'm so proud to have her on this podcast. So thank you so much for joining us today, Elle. I'm really looking forward to hearing about this big journey that you've been on and some of your takeaways from that.
Awesome. Thank you for having me. Yes, I'm so proud to know you and see what you've done with Mindful Sparks. You're such an inspiration, and I'm really happy to be here.
Oh, thanks. So let's start at the beginning. We ask all the people we're chatting with, can you pinpoint a moment or a moment kind of in time, a period of time where you started to become aware of mindfulness, and how did that shift from an awareness into a practice?
All right. Well, that's a great question. I think it's almost hard to remember. Like I said, I've kind of was introduced to the idea of mindfulness when I was in high school. I was really athletic and I hurt myself. I had a big knee injury and I was just kind of struggling. I didn't know what to do. And I had this amazing teacher. And she was like, "Hey, you should," it was really weird. She was like, "You should come to this like meditation thing." And I had never heard of that before. And it was like this very interesting, like monk guy had come to my small town, was at a church when we sat in like pews and meditated for like an hour. And that was kind of my first like time ever hearing about it or trying it. And it was very like, I don't know, I came from a very religious background, so it was very kind of strange seeming to me, I guess, at that time. And so I was probably like 16, 17. So that was kind of like my first introduction. And I was like, whoa, this is super weird. But I also really liked it, even though it was super hard. Like it was the hardest, longest hour of my life for sure. Cause I was like with my teenage boyfriend and we were like sitting there like, what is this? What are we doing? Like sitting in silence in this church with all these people. It was very, I don't know, it's kind of a splash into the deep end in the fact of like, it was very advanced, I would say, meditation that I was very over my head. So that was kind of my first introduction to it. But I think then as I got older and I've always kind of struggled with anxiety. And so it turned into like me searching out more ways to deal with that. And then it kind of came back to mindfulness, I'd say a few years later, where I was kind of like, actually like learning about it and starting at an appropriate level and kind of like, you know, dipping my toes in in a better way that made it more sustainable, more valuable and effective, I guess, for what I was looking for. So I literally had a college university class that went towards my degree. That was a mindfulness class and it was really great. And that was kind of like my first like, okay, this is something I want to really dive into more and see how this can play out in my life and what I can do with this. Um, so that was kind of like the beginning of my journey and how it kind of turned into, yeah, where I am now, 20 years later.
Very cool. And I think it's so important you touched upon how important it was to kind of dip your toes in first, like really start at the beginning, like pure
Yeah,
basic 101. This is the bare bones of what mindfulness is, because I think sometimes people can mistake mindfulness for meditation. And
yeah,
while meditation is a really amazing mindfulness practice, they're not always the same thing. And
right.
it's super hard. Meditation is genuinely one of the hardest practices I find to do. I find it one of the most beneficial, but one of the hardest to do sometimes. And I can only imagine, I can't imagine if I was 16 and I was just sitting in a church in silence, being like, I have no idea what's
Yeah, it was very strange. It was very like, what is happening?
And how did you go from then, like, so studying psychology, was it?
Hmm.
Studying psychology to then teaching, because you were a teacher before you moved into counseling, right? So how did that kind
Right.
of journey pan out?
So yeah, like I said, I have a psychology degree. I did a lot of work in that degree, actually on mindfulness. I was a research assistant in a like one of the grad students was doing a project about mindful gardening with elderly people, and I actually got to be like an assistant with that. And I did all like the data and all of the analysis, helped her with doing all that. So my name's on that research paper. Which, so that was a very interesting kind of like thing that I did. That was like, oh wow, like can be done in so many different ways, right? Like it was gardening with, you know, elderly people. That was, and there was so much significance in the benefits that it had for their lives. And that was kind of like a wow, like this is really scientifically based. And I think that was like a really important thing for me. Like I said, I came from a really religious background. So I was very skeptical of everything and very kind of like, oh, like that's too dippy or kind of weird with a lot of times with things. And so that was kind of my first like, whoa, like this is actually scientifically, back, like there's a lot of research behind this. And so then after I graduated, I decided to move abroad. I didn't really feel like America like aligned with my lifestyle. So I moved abroad, and I just was an English teacher when I first moved abroad. But as I like continued working with younger kids, I because my own practice, like that was when I really got like into like I was going to yoga like several times a night, doing a lot of mindfulness practice and doing any kind of thing that I could find, right? Whatever it was, like a static dance or uh, Kundalini or Ashtanga. Like I was just really diving into like the whole world of yoga, and then that and mindfulness just kind of came along with it. But then I noticed as I was doing stuff with my class, my little kids, it was super helpful. I was having a lot of success with like emotional regulation and classroom management just in general, like giving them those breaks and building in those mindful moments. Because for kids, it's really easy, not easy, but it's almost easier for them to access that. And if they're guided, it's really, really amazing to see how that can happen. And so that was kind of working with little kids, how successful it was. And then as I began doing my master's degree in education, I really focused on mindfulness. That was like my big uh, focus the whole time. Every single project I did, every paper, every dissertation I looked into, it was all about mindfulness in the classroom and how it can help students be able to be better learners, to be better people, well-rounded, all of the things that the research shows mindfulness is helpful for. So I really got to dive into that in my master's degree. And then I was just super lucky and was applying to be a kindergartner at the job, kindergarten teacher at my job that I was at now. And they were like, wow, you should have a great background. We're looking for a counselor, like a specific social emotional needs counselor. And I was like so excited. I was like, oh my gosh, yes, I get to teach mindfulness all day, every day. And now I've been doing it for this is my third year. So I'm still a bit new, but and learning that counseling, unfortunately, isn't just teaching mindfulness all day as much as I wish I could be. But that's kind of been my journey, I guess, leading to there is just diving into it personally and then casually bringing it into my job. And then I'm super lucky that I was able to turn it into kind of what I do.
That's really awesome. Really, really awesome. And it's interesting to hear because quite a few other people that I've spoken to have learned about it in some capacity, just casually or through like further education, brought it into their classrooms and then been like, wait a minute, I do all of this every day with my kids. Why aren't I doing it for me? And that's how a lot of people manage to like begin to practice themselves. But to hear you say like you already had a very well established practice yourself, and then you were like, well, let's just try bringing it into the classroom. I think that's it's a very different dynamic, right? When you're bringing that in. I was kind of I didn't call it mindfulness when I started doing it because I wasn't really aware of it at that point. Like this was probably what, 2012, 2013. But through yoga and meditation, I was bringing in some breath work, a bit of movement, you know, like brain breaks and these mindful moments and pausing. That was more mirroring my practice, but I was like, this isn't working. At the time, I was teaching 9-year-olds, and I was like, this just doesn't relate to them at all. So then it was kind of like, how do I make that accessible for younger kids? And
Yeah.
now, like, you know, I teach younger ones, 4 to 6 years old mainly, and it's just, yeah, like you say, it's amazing. They're just sponges. They just pick it up and they're so open to everything. They're so open
Yeah.
to trying something new and being like, yeah, let's just lay down on the floor and try this breathing thing, no problem. And you're like,
Hmm.
great.
Yeah.
What was
No,
some of
for
the
sure.
biggest, you sorry,
No, go ahead.
you mentioned like you saw like it helped with like classroom management. And I think that's something that people might not necessarily automatically link with mindfulness. But
Hmm.
what can you think of some examples of how, or some of the differences you noticed when you were bringing these mindfulness practices in terms of classroom management?
I mean, I think just in general, schools and classrooms are really overstimulating places, right? There's so much going on. There's so many uh, emotions and different perspectives, and there's just so, you know, events and whatever. It's an overstimulating place. So I think when it comes to classroom management, I really use mindfulness as a tool of like, especially when it comes to big emotions, like it's okay to feel this way. Like, you know, it's not, I understand you. I feel or I understand how you're feeling. Like, let's take a moment and get into our bodies, connect our brain and our breath and bring it all together. And then it just seemed to really help with those, like the big things initially. And then when I kind of started bringing it into like a routine within the classroom, like myself, when I would get overstimulated or frustrated or whatever, I would really try to model that within the classroom of like, you know what, right now I need to take a moment. I'm feeling overwhelmed and like kind of using it that way. And then the kids also then were able to use it in their more day to day kind of just self management, I would say. I'd say that would be more the word, like being able to do it themselves, like know like, hey, right now I'm feeling this way and it's okay for me to have these emotions, and I have tools that allow me to, you know, regulate, and then I can talk about it later when I'm feeling ready to do so. And so I think that's kind of what I mean when I use it as a classroom tool, is like it helps you to, you know, I give them that realness of me being a human and letting them know like this is what something that's worked for me, maybe it'll work for you. And I feel like it was more of just, yeah, I think of classroom management really as like that connection that you build throughout the year, or throughout, you know, your time with your students, and being able to recognize that we all have moments where we need to slow down and to take a look at what's going on, and kind of just connect and regroup. And I feel like that is what I mean when it's been helpful in classroom management, of just giving kids actual tools to use rather than just being like, go take a time out or take a break, even. Like that isn't giving them any actual tangible thing to use, if that makes sense.
100%. And I love that. I love that you touched upon. There's two things I really want to talk about. There was one you said about this worked for me and maybe it will work for you. And I think that's such an important conversation to have around mindfulness, regardless of who, you know, you're talking to about it, is what resonates for me might not necessarily resonate for you. And I
Right.
really enjoy, you know, meditation or journaling or movement or gardening. You know, that's a way that I can really connect with myself and just kind of check in with myself. But that doesn't mean that that's going to work for you, and that's okay, because there
Mm-hmm.
does need to be that space to explore different things and to try different things, and to be like, okay, cool, like actually I like to have, maybe I don't enjoy that kind of calm quietness, I like a bit more movement, and I
Mm-hmm.
find I can connect more when I'm running or swimming or dancing. Um,
Yeah.
And I think sometimes that can be a bit of like a barrier for some people to kind of want to
Yeah.
try mindfulness because they have an idea it looks like this,
Hmm.
and that doesn't work for me, so therefore I'm not, I can't engage with it. So I think that's really important, and to show kids that from such a young age of like, let's just try things and see what works. And it's okay
Hmm.
if it doesn't work,
Yeah.
'cause it keeps
And
them.
maybe it works today and won't
Yeah.
doesn't work tomorrow. Like it's okay if every day is not the same. I think that's important too.
Yeah, 100%. I
Mm.
mean, as adults, there are days I can sit and meditate, and there are days when I feel like I've sat there for hours and it's been about 2 minutes and I'm frustrated and annoyed, and I go and do something else and I feel better for it. But again, that was a learning journey of taking time to know and to be okay with the fact that my mindfulness practice does look different day to day.
Hmm.
And another thing you touched upon that I think is a really important point to talk about and to bring light to is the connection, not only with ourselves, but also that kind of community, and showing that we all have that common humanity, right? As a teacher, I just need to sit down for 5 minutes. I just need a moment to kind of regroup, go do some quiet reading or do this activity quietly. Just give me a couple minutes. I think sometimes teachers can put themselves, or they are put on like this kind of
Yeah.
pedestal where we've got to have everything perfect, and every lesson's got to run smoothly, and every piece of work a child does has to be worthy to go up on a notice board or whatever it is. And some
Right.
days, there are times when we just go, it's not working, and let's just take a moment and do that with compassion and honesty and awareness, and then be like, and it gives the kids then permission to also do the same, right? They don't have
Yeah.
to be perfect all the time. They don't have to get 100% all the time. That isn't where their value lies. Their value lies in being able to recognize what's happening with them and support themselves in the best way possible.
Yeah, exactly.
So do you find, like you said, like when you were like going into counseling, you were like, yes, I'm going to teach mindfulness all the time, but obviously there are other aspects to that. But in regards to the mindfulness lessons you're teaching with your students, so you go like all the way up, right? You go up to high school now, right?
Yeah, I teach grades 1 to 12, though I don't teach the older kids like as regularly as I teach the younger kids. It's more like I do assemblies or events or health class, like I do it in different ways. But that little kids, I have a set class schedule for them and I see one every day. So we do a lot more of that routine mindfulness when I go into class with them. Like I
Mm.
literally walk in and all the kids are like, yes, and they're like super excited to like go be wherever they want and they get to do whatever they want. And I was like, I basically, I just call it our do nothing time, because I felt like that makes it relatable for the kids and they're like super excited about it and they like think that they're doing nothing and they are really if they don't want to. And but then I obviously will talk them through different kinds of exercises each week and do kind of fun stuff with them. So I think that's my favorite thing that I get to do at my job, because it's not super rare. I mean, do get to do it every day, but it's not the number one thing I spend my time on. But like, I swear I go to class, it's like always in the afternoon, and I'll get there and I'm like, I need it today, guys. We need to just sit and relax and just do nothing. And they love it. They're always so excited. 3 years in, and they still get like, yes, it's time to meditate. Or they call it meditate, which is so funny because I swear I never say that word. And then some of them will like sit there in their little like Buddha things. I think it's because it's like a Buddhist country, right? So they're like, we know this. I'm like, I don't call it meditation ever. That's not what we're doing. But it's, I think, maybe the word that's accessible or that they know more commonly used, I guess. But yeah, it's very fun.
Yeah, I definitely think there's a common misconception that mindfulness and meditation are the same thing, right?
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
it's really funny, the younger they are, the more like perfect this position is, they're ramrod straight, the eyes are squeezed tight, and like, their fingers are really pushing. And then the
Yeah.
older they get, they're like, I'm going to experiment a bit more. What does it look like if I just slouch like this?
Yeah.
I
When I told them like, you don't have to do that, you can lay down and just like put your legs up the wall or something, and they're like, what? no, this is how my mom taught me to do it or whatever, if they've had experience of doing something in that realm. And so it's very funny to, yeah,
That's
like,
cool.
what do you mean we can lay down? Like, oh, okay.
And what do you think, or what would be your biggest kind of takeaway? So now you've been there for 3 years. So you've seen, you've invested, you set the foundations for these kids and you're invested in them now. You've been with them for a few years. What are some of the biggest takeaways or observations, generally that you're noticing with these kids who have had regular mindfulness practices and exposure to these kind of conversations, normalizing conversations about emotions, normalizing conversations about taking a break? Are you seeing anything beginning to change in like how they deal with challenges or friendship fallouts or anything like that?
I wish. I think that there is subtly, and I think that there is more so with like specific kids, and that sounds really bad, but I think that is the challenge of teaching mindfulness in more of a broad sweeping, like everyone's going to do this, right? Because not everyone's into it, and there's a lot of the like, the kids that just want to play video games or play soccer all day, and they are like closed off to that. And I do think that they are more open to this and they're able to discuss their emotions and they have a bit more of accessibility than maybe a kid that had never had that, but it is still like uh, a hard thing to crack. I feel like sometimes when you get those kind of just kids that are like resistant, like I don't want and I'm not into this, like they're just taking a nap, which is also okay, and I think a good place for them to start. But I honestly, I don't know. I think that there is kids that I think are getting benefits from like being able to take breaths, and like they'll say things often in those moments, that whether or not they always do them is different. But I know that like when I'll talk to kids and say like, what's another choice that we can do right now that can help you move through this moment, and then a lot of times like they'll say like, oh, I'm going to take 5 breaths, or I'm going to, I'm going to just go wash my face, or I'm going to take a little walk, or they'll have these kind of coping skills that we've discussed a lot, that are often mindful activities. It's really connected, I think, with a lot of the curriculum that I teach, based on like social emotional curriculums frameworks that I work with. Um, about I think like got these coping skills that are again basically just immersing yourself in the moment and being able to recognize like your emotions and what's going on in the moment. So I do think that there is some, I don't want to say there's no kids or that I don't notice anything, but I don't want to be negative either, but I think it will take, I think of that process, just like for myself, right? It's been 20 years and I still struggle with being able to like use mindfulness sometimes in moments that I need it maybe more, even though I've practiced it all. I do say that to the kids a lot. Like this is just a practice where we have to do this right now while we're calm, so that we are able to access it at a different time. So I think there's specific kids definitely, but I think because I teach it to everyone, I think I get down on myself sometimes. But I have to remember, like, even if just like 2 kids are like affected by that, which I definitely know 2 kids that have come to me and who I've seen out in our school community, like making more thoughtful choices, making more just being more thoughtful, I guess, in general about what they're doing, because kids can kind of just be like sometimes, um, but those kids that are like that are still sometimes still like that. But I at least think that they're able to, I don't know, be more, like I said, open than maybe a kid that has never been exposed to that kind of idea.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's a challenge that a lot of schools face, a lot of teachers face, because this isn't a quick fix. This isn't
Yeah.
something like you do term one, you introduce it, term two, you practice it, and term three, you've mastered it. Like this is a
Yeah.
lifelong skill. I mean, yeah, it's been nearly 20 years that I've been practicing it. And exactly like you said, something will happen. And I know I have the coping skills. I know I have the strategies in place to allow me to be more objective in a situation, to not be so reactive. I know that. And then like the next day, I'll be like, what happened? Like you just went back into 15-year-old you immediately and was just, fired off something. And then you're just like, I didn't mean any of that. I'm sorry. Like, and
Yeah.
go back and do the work. But I think having, like you're saying, just having that exposure to it, being part of the conversations, being part of that community, whether they're really engaged with it or not at this moment in time, they're still looking and hearing and seeing how it impacts other people. So while it might not be resonating with them right now, that seed is definitely planted,
Yeah.
and like, oh wow, my friend didn't like get so mad that time when they lost the football match. Normally they get really mad. Like, that's cool.
Mm.
Oh, maybe next time I can try something like what they did so I don't get as mad. And
Mm-hmm.
like I was at a school for a few years as the mindfulness teacher, and some kids just get it, right? For whatever
Yeah.
reason. It's definitely not an age thing. It's not necessarily a
Mm-mm.
maturity thing. It's just whether they get it or not, right? And
Yeah.
there's so many factors that play into a reason why a child might not engage with it straight away. But you could see subtly how they would influence their friends. And sometimes I'm like, okay, maybe actually you're doing a better job of it than me because you're speaking the same language as your friends. Like,
Mm.
they get another 7-year-old talking to them about it, as opposed to maybe an adult coming in and being, you know, oh, there's another adult telling me something I need to do. You know,
Yeah.
it is a,
Yeah.
it's a beautiful journey, but it can be challenging. I agree, for sure.
Right. Just like anything with education though, right? It's
Mm,
a lot of the fruits of our labor aren't seen until someone has a fully developed brain. So
yeah.
I hope that, yeah, when they're 25, they'll think back and be like, wow, I'm so glad I had that awesome counselor that taught me how to be mindful.
I think that's also another point that isn't talked about enough. Like, we're teaching kids mindfulness, we're giving them skills and strategies and tools and normalizing conversations about it, but their brain's not fully developed till their
Yeah.
mid-20s. So
Yeah.
what they do with that information now isn't necessarily going to be what they do with it in their 20s, 30s, or 40s. It is just exposing them to ideas and concepts that hopefully they'll latch on to later in life and can fully integrate.
Totally. That's why when I think of my teacher, I always think of that because that happened exactly to me as my teacher tried to introduce me to
Mm.
this, this world of things. And at the time I was kind of like, okay, even though I was pretty open to it, I was searching and seeking, but it didn't come until, yeah, I was a bit older and had more of a capacity, I guess, for it to be
Mhm.
something I use. And so that's what I'm hoping. I'm gonna channel my inner Miss McIntyre.
I love it. I know you are doing a great job. Not I'm sure, I know you're doing a great job. I know how much you care about the kids and how much work you put in and passion you put into it. So I'm sure they're having a great, I mean, 3 years later, if you're still walking in a classroom and they're like, yay, you're doing a good job. Right?
Right. I know. It does always make me feel very good when I come in and they're still excited about it. And like I do, like I build it up every week. And so like the first week we start with like 1 minute. We're just doing 1 minute. And then now it's the end of the year. So we're doing like 20 minutes. And they're like, let's do an hour. Let's do infinity. Like they just like go on. They just want to do it forever, they say. And it was really cool to see their enthusiasm for it. So
Oh, that's wonderful. I love it. Cool. So just to wrap this up, a question that we're asking everybody, because as mindfulness does show up differently from everybody, the way people explain it is also going to be different. We found that through people that have come to our workshops and trainings, around nearly 60% of people who've come have heard the word mindfulness. They kind of know what it is, but they can't really explain it. They don't really understand it fully enough to be able to talk about it comfortably. So if one of these people came to you and were like, what is mindfulness? How would you explain that to them?
I think that it's a very mind body experience. It's a very um, personal journey within yourself, how you connect your thoughts and your cognitive or your cognition and your feelings and all of these things that are happening here, and how you kind of connect your body together with that and have it all work together, I guess is how I really like just generally see it. It's a way of getting out of our heads, of getting out of the world, off of the internet, out, out of all of these spaces that we occupy all the time, and like come back into our body, which is a really like primal, normal human experience, but somehow is really like I think about this a lot of like, this is just so simple. Like when you explain it, it sounds so simple, right? And I think that's when you get really into something, you're always like, well, yeah, of course, that's common sense. That's very simple. I feel like the idea of mindfulness is just something that humans should do naturally, but doesn't really come naturally. And I guess throughout history, that's true. But I think even more so in our modern society, like we're really detached from ourselves and we're just occupying all of these other things all of the time. And so simply, I guess it's, yeah, just connecting your body and your mind together and really experiencing that, really being there and being through the good and the bad and the pain and all of the experiences that you have, and just being fully able to accept that reality for what it is, I guess is that doesn't sound simple, but I feel like it is just that simple, like getting your body to be within itself and to fully be there, is how I would explain it.
Cool. I agree. It's like you said, I think you made an important point. When you're passionate about something or you know about something, that's your jam, then you just go, well, it's so simple, you just do this. But then you've got to come at it in such a beginner's mindset to be like, no,
Yeah.
how do I just dip my toes back in the water? How do I just get a feel for what it is? And I love the
Mm,
idea of just coming back to your body and just sitting in your body and being like one reflective question I love to ask is just, what do I need right now? What's happening in my body? What does it need to be,
mm,
to thrive, to feel good? What do I need? And that might be drink some water, go to the toilet, take a rest, but like
mm,
you're saying, because we can get so distracted, those little cues we can ignore or we don't hear, right?
mm-hmm. Exactly. And it's hard to turn all that noise off. But with mindfulness, I feel like it's that opportunity to kind of not turn it off at all, but to sit with it, like you said, and to pay attention to, yeah, those little nuances that we wouldn't always
Mm.
allow ourselves to, I don't want to say indulge, but to listen to.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Elle, for being
Yeah.
part of this and for sharing your thoughts. It's been so lovely chatting with you.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you so much. It was always could talk about mindfulness for hours and hours.
Sure. Awesome. Well, thanks so much. And I look forward to seeing you soon.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Bye.